like, I can get some offline, maybe get some personal information and get you that HAB agenda if you'd like.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm going down the road, so I'm not showing you my ugly mug. So thank you.
We'll work it out. We'll get you the info, Jim. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments for our friends from EPA? Well,
thank you so much
Jeff.
for your time. Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Again, I'm very excited about having more involvement with this board, and appreciate the time, and look forward to coming up with some ideas on what we can present and how to better serve the board. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, Maxwell Woods, we're going to come over to you now.
All right. Give me 1 second here.
Can you see your presentation?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Appreciate that, Mark. Let me just pull up my version, which has my notes. 1 second, please.
So in Max, I think you had, what, 45 minutes?
I do, but I don't know. Those are, as you can tell by how we're progressing here, the estimates on the agenda are estimates. We did our best to kind of figure out what we might need. So we'll see where we go. For a little afternoon, I hope that's okay, and then we can kind of figure out what the break situation is like for everybody. But I might as well just dive in and see where it goes. Huh? How about that? Like I always do at these meetings, I just sort of have a couple slides here, and I'll speak to some notes that I've put together, rounding up things that have happened since the last meeting, some items to look ahead, some just general updates, and a lot of my material. I swear that I wasn't copying Sarah or John Price or Ryan Miller or anybody. It's just I think there's some common themes you'll see in the slides here, probably because we're all paying attention and working on the same hot topics at the site. But anyway, let me just get in here. I really want to first thank everybody, as always, for this meeting, particularly thanking National Academies of Science, our representative Mike from earlier this morning. I thought that was great to have a perspective from him and to bring in their voice to our board. I really appreciated that. And of course, thanking all of our presenters from federal state agencies today. I mentioned at the very beginning here, the Oregon legislature has just started its session, its long session. The session formally started last week, but yesterday was the first real day getting into to committee meetings and to the business of the Oregon legislature. So I wouldn't expect that we have our elected officials here with us today, or maybe they've been sporadically coming in. I appreciate if they have been able to join. That's just the nature of this cycle.
Hey, Max,
and so
your
yes.
Slides are not advancing. If you
that's okay. No,
okay.
Thank you, Sarah. I am just speaking to the first one. Thanks. It's okay. So the Oregon legislature, elected officials on our board, just a reminder, we have 6 positions that are from the legislature, 3 senators, 3 representatives. Those haven't always been filled. And we have had some turnover from elected officials who either decided not to run or perhaps stepped down from their positions. And so the elected officials onto the OHCB, we have some openings that hopefully will be filled this session, and we'll be back to full participation by our next meeting. I'm also going to state an obvious point. Oregon has a new governor now. Governor Kotek became our governor last week. And if anybody is following the news, there's been a flurry of announcements on staffing in the governor's office. There is a governor's policy representative to the board. That person has not yet been named. I would expect that they will be identified fairly soon, but there are a few hundred boards and commissions in Oregon state government. So we are one of all of them, sort of awaiting where the representation and where our contact will come from. But my boss, our director of ODO, Director Janine Benner has been meeting with the governor's office's officials and will do more so in the coming weeks to help identify who the person is that'll be policy advising, policy directing towards energy policy overall, the state, and well as specifically an OHCV representative from the governor's office. On the board itself, we have, I believe, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, still one vacancy of the members of the public. I remember there
Yes.
are 10 members of the public who are on the board, or the voting members of the public. We have one vacancy. So if anybody knows any people who might be interested in joining, we'll try and get the word out of the work that the board does and its importance. You can pass along their contact information to Mark or to me. The appointment process does go through the governor's office, and I know that there is a new director of the executive appointments shop in the governor's office, Governor Kotek's office now. Of course, they have many positions to fill, and so they'll be getting up to speed quickly, I'm sure. But if we have identified candidates, please pass them along. We are down one person right now. Okay, Mark, why don't we go down to the second slide now, and I'll get into a little bit of the more substance of what I wanted to talk about now, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, so since the last meeting, our staff has submitted one comment letter, just one, to DOE. That was a comment letter on the what DOE calls its 5-year plan placemat, and that's not a derogatory term. They actually call it a placemat itself, so it's maybe perhaps tongue in cheek, but the plan itself is a large document that kind of looks like a placemat, full of information, particularly about what the site activities are expected to occur over the next 5-year cycle. I wouldn't say it's a plan itself necessarily, more of a maybe a summary or a document that explains what is otherwise planned to occur at the site in the next 5 years. I say otherwise because it's not a comprehensive. You might think of like, well, what's a plan for Hanford for 5 years? That's going to be a massive document, and what's everything else? Well, it's more of a summary. It's a public information awareness tool as I was looking at it, and so as I note here on our bullets, our primary comment is really on how the tool itself is used or could be used better or could be improved to share information. I know that the DOE communications office works really hard to make sure that information is understandable, is presented in multiple formats and fashions to the public to try and get attention and awareness to Hanford issues and to just what's happening at the site. We just heard from Ecology. Ryan Miller and his team worked pretty hard to do the same thing. And so our comments were mostly in the spirit of how to make this tool more useful for information sharing for the public. Although we did have two, say, substantive comments that we wanted to see on the placemat itself. One was about transuranic waste shipment preparation, and that specifically is, or transuranic or true waste. We talked about this just a little bit earlier. True waste is the type of waste that is planned to be sent to the New Mexico Waste Isolation Pilot Plant Facility, or WIPP, which is the underground storage facility for this type of waste. And while that's still planned to occur, shipping from the Hanford site to the New Mexico waste facility, the placemat, the 5-year plan, didn't describe steps that will occur in the next 5 years to get ready for that shipment. And the shipment, I think it wasn't on the placemat because the shipment date is not till 2028. And so it kind of falls off of the 5-year cycle there. But plenty of action needs to occur to get ready for that shipping campaign to start. So we recommended that future iterations include a note about that. It's also a big deal for the community. It's a big deal for Oregon. There's going to be many, many trucks traveling across our highways, taking this waste from Hanford to southeastern New Mexico for permanent placement. It's a good thing, but it also means there needs a lot of planning and preparation to do that safely for both worker safety as well as community and transportation safety along the route. So that we wanted to highlight that. And the second thing we thought it's worth recommending, and I think that there should be more awareness and information about the NRDA natural resource damage assessment process that's occurring as well. We just heard from Sarah, our team member Sarah, about that process, and it doesn't perhaps get the publicity that it should, because it's great work, it's important work, it's important for Oregon, and so we thought that it should be recommended to be highlighted on the placemat there. And I will note that this letter was primarily authored by Matt Hendrickson, our newest team member. Matt's first, I think, major assignment was to put that letter together, and he did a good job for us. So thanks to Matt on that. Budgets, right? So John and Sarah both talked about budgets, and John and I will have to share numbers because the number that I have is slightly less than what he just shared with you. I have a 2.735 billion between the two Hanford offices, and I think John was showing a 2.8 billion number. So that's probably my error. If I made the mistake, it's me, not him. But I thought it was important to just again to reiterate that the fiscal year 2023 budget was passed. People, if you track this, was passed at the end of December, about 3 months into the fiscal year. That's normal. Congress evidently never passes a fiscal year budget on time. There's always continuing resolutions, and then that's how it goes. The increase, whether you use the number that I have here or it would be even more, if it's 2.8 billion or so, it's a considerable increase from the fiscal year 2022 funding level. And I suspect that's due to, one, the good work that DOE and its teams do, right? They need to demonstrate that there's value in the work they're doing, there's results, they're done safely, and good stewards of public dollars. And I think that's reflected in the fact that Congress is authorizing more money, considerably more money for the site. Perhaps also due to the good efforts by various stakeholders, including us, to raise awareness and say more money is necessary. As much money as being spent at Hanford, much more money is necessary to get the job done on schedule as agreed upon. So the last bullet there about the fiscal year 2024 request, I call it the governor's et al. Letter. John Price talked about this in his presentation. That's the letter from, it was signed, and I shared this with the board last time, previous Governor Brown, Governor Inslee from Washington State, and many other parties sent a letter to the White House noting that the what we might call the compliant budget, meaning a budget to get to the level of compliance with the tri-party agreement milestones, is estimated in fiscal year 2024 to be 3.76 billion and escalating considerably after that date. So you can see that even with a pretty substantial increase from fiscal year 2022 to 2023, another $1 billion is what is requested, or at least recommended to be requested and authorized to the two Hanford offices for fiscal year 2024, and then much more beyond that. So it's a lot of money to go there, but you know, the work is necessary. Maybe just a note for the board too. I have the combined Hanford's offices, and just to share this point again, there are two primary DOE offices at the site that operate. And just a reminder, those two offices are the Office of River Protection, or ORP, and the Richland Operations Office, or RL. The two acronyms there, ORP and RL. They both operate under a one Hanford sort of administrative umbrella. But the funding is authorized to just two different offices. And so if you ever look into federal funding spreadsheets, like sometimes we do, you will see the two line items for the two offices, but those roll up to the one Hanford. Any questions about this slide before I hop on to the next?
Yes, Max, if the federal debt ceiling, if they don't raise that in the near future, or there's a delay, what sort of an impact would that have on Hanford's funding?
Oh, that's a scary consideration, isn't it? I don't know. Jeff. I think we'd have to talk to some of our friends from DOE and maybe the budgeting offices and figure that out. I can only imagine. I mean, this is just, if I was in Washington, D.C. right now and I was a budget analyst or a funder at DOE or any federal agency, I would be scrambling to try and understand exactly that question. What does it mean? Where does the funding come? I would think that Hanford cleanup is mission critical. Maybe we would call it that. Something that is so important that a level of funding and work to just maintain safety needs to continue. And there are massive investments in infrastructure that can't just be stopped. And we heard this morning about the startup of the melters at the direct feed low activity waste treatment facility. And I understand, just as an example, once those melters are up to heat, up to temperature, they can't be turned off. So there can't be, to play perhaps a silly example, the federal government can't not pay its electric bill and maintain electricity supply to keep those melters going. That has to happen, or we're going to lose billions of dollars of investment in the facility. So I can only imagine this is a critical site, but it's hard to say. It seems like a scary proposition, and I with the amount of press that's happening right now around the debt ceiling issue, we will just hope that cooler heads prevail and that America honors its obligations, shall we say.
Okay, Stephen Bedricks has a question.
Well, just along those lines, I mean, do we know what happened at Hanford during previous government shutdowns? Like, I know I'm more familiar with the different parts of the government, but they were able to maintain some like life and safety and mission critical, HVAC kind of stuff. But then other things that were more, we've spent a lot of money on this experiment. It was like, okay, I guess you just throw that money away and get to start again and have fun.
That's a good question. I would ask maybe if Tom Cecilia or Mark Reese or Sarah, if you were here during the previous, I wasn't in this position during the last.
I would actually ask Ken.
Or Ken, oh, there you go. Ken's on the board. Yeah, Ken. Do you have insight?
Well, it is varied because of the one thing I can think of most recently was a few years ago, where EPA basically their employees were temporarily furloughed, while DOE had enough carryover money that they were able to continue. So that was a period of a couple of weeks. And I think it is just going to vary depending on what their financial situations are. But not good, any of it.
There was another scenario where DOE was funded with Department of Defense, and everything else in the government was not funded. So that might have been the same one you're talking about, Ken.
I think it's a different one, but there's been a lot through the years.
Yeah, I think in recent years there's been two. I know it happened in 2013 or 2012 or something when I was with the office, where there was a couple week furlough, and then after that there was one more. But as I remember it, from an EPA standpoint, we were told to to shut everything down and go home and not touch our computer. Like, we could not do a thing. And from a contractor standpoint, when it came working for WRPS, when this kind of came up about 4 years ago or so, there was funding that had already been allocated. So the contractors were it didn't end up being a shutdown, but the contractors were going to be able to continue to do work, whereas some of the other federal employees may not have been able to come to work, is how I understand it.
A lot of questions. Yeah, a lot of questions. Okay, I will go on to my next slide, and I thought I would highlight a few of the upcoming events, really, or items of interest and concern to us that are coming up. The very last bullet is what John Price talked about, the site permit revision to their Ecology's Dangerous Waste Site-Wide Permit Revision 9, or Rev 9 as it's sometimes called. I won't really talk more about that because John covered it, but it's a major document that when the time is right, we, as both Oregon Department of Energy staff and this board, we can talk about how we want to comment on that document. The National Academies, that's the very first bullet here. This morning we heard the big update from Michael, National Academies. He mentioned the public meeting on the 31st and the first, the 2-day public meeting on the 31st and the 1st in 2 weeks from today. One of his slides had a note about state of Oregon Department of Energy being an invited commenter at that meeting, and we are. So myself and Matt Hendrickson are going to Richland, and we will present our position, our views on that study directly to the academies, to the panel, to the panelists, to the public. It's a public meeting, and if anybody is interested, I would encourage. You can either come to Richland, or perhaps easier, you could watch the virtual feed. And I think there's also a public comment opportunity if anybody as individuals wanted to comment, but nevertheless, we will comment. As we have from the beginning of the study. I will also, to be clear, that I think I mentioned at the beginning that at the beginnings of this morning session, that at the April 2022 presentation, Jeff Burright, who was our member of our team at that time, presented our position in Richland on the previous iteration of the study. We have also provided maybe 2 written comment letters at various points on the study, and we had virtual presentations in 2021 to the study committee. So we've been involved representing Odo and Oregon since the study kicked off in summer of 2021. And so it's coming here to its conclusion. We'll maintain our involvement to that study. Laura asks, what's the date? The meeting is on January 31st and February 1st. Our presentation is at the evening of the 31st. The meeting is most of the day on the 31st, and then it goes into the evening. I think my time slot is 5 p.m., 5:30 p.m., something like that. And then on the next day, on February 1st, it kicks off in the morning and goes until middle of the day. There is an agenda and a schedule, and I think it was in the chat link earlier from today, but I'll note that one of the things we'll do after this meeting is compile all of the chats and the links and the threads like we've done in the past and send an email to the board so you'll have information there. Okay, Hanford Advisory Board. Yeah, thanks, Mia. There you go. Hanford Advisory Board, just as a note, it's sometimes people get us confused, OHCB and the HAB. I am on the Hanford Advisory Board. Tom Cecilia is an alternate for us on the Hanford Advisory Board, and Tom's been on the board for many years and is deeply involved. Jeff Wyatt represents OHCB on the HAB. Dan Solitz is the alternate right now. Thanks, Dan, for your continuing work there. Matt Hendrickson has applied to be on the board as another alternate for Oregon. And Jim Doherty, thank you very much. I understand you've applied to be on the HAB as the alternate for the OHCB. And Mia is on the HAB as well, not representing an Oregon interest, but representing your employer and Hanford Challenge. So the Hanford Advisory Board, just a little bit about it, since we do talk, people occasionally talk about the HAB. That is the official FACA board. We used that term earlier. Federal Advisory Committee Act is the federal government, and the Federal Advisory Committee Act is a federal statute that governs how these boards are operate. And the Hanford Advisory Board has been in existence for many years. Ken was on the HAB for a very long time, representing us. And the purpose of the board is to provide advice to the tri-party agencies, to DOE, to EPA, and to Ecology, Washington Ecology, policy advice about the site, about cleanup activities, and it's a full range of interests that the board might provide to the parties. Tom notes that the 29th anniversary. Okay, there you go. Almost 3 decades of the. Yeah, there you go. Almost 3 decades of the HAB. So 2024 will be the big year for a 30-year anniversary. That's good. The HAB meets every. I will admit that it's perhaps much more intense than this board. The level of commitment is higher. The meetings there's a meeting every other month. They're always 2-day meetings. They're now back to being in person since last summer. There's a virtual component, but it's in person. There's committees that do a lot of work. Tom Cecilia represents us and works on, and he's the chair of the Rivers and Plateau Committee, one of the committees deeply involved in many other committees with the board. So it's a great forum for us to be involved in, and for stakeholders to be involved in, and so we continue our work on the HAB. I have a note here about the Hanford emergency drill, and every year, I thought it was just interesting to note of all the things that we do here. One of them is emergency preparedness. And from the Hanford site, there's a 50-mile emergency planning zone, or EPZ. State of Oregon is within that 50 miles, and we are the emergency response coordinating body for the state in those drills and those exercises. We have we work with there's county emergency planners in Morrow and Umatilla County that both work with us on planning for the emergency drills. And Mark Reese, our lead planning coordinator, leads that effort involved in the planning for the events themselves. I serve as an incident commander for those events for the state response when we do those drills. That drill's not coming up till May, but I thought it was worth mentioning because it's a big deal. The Hanford site only does one major drill a year for us to be involved in. Separate from Hanford, we also do regular emergency response drills with the Columbia Generating Station, which is the nuclear power plant that is on Hanford, but not of Hanford, right? It's on DOE leased land, but it's independent. And they do more frequent drills as we work with them on emergency response preparation to represent our state there. And then, as I mentioned before, the last bullet here is about the dangerous waste site-wide permit. It's worth mentioning because it's such a big document. John Price mentioned it. It's been in process for many years, as I understand, to do this update. There was a previous draft version of that document many years. What did John mention? 2012, 2013, there was a previous iteration. A lot of comments came in, and then a lot of work's been done to revise the permit, and still more work to be done before it's available for another iteration of public review. I guess in about a year's time from right now. So we'll be ready to comment when that comes out. And I will advocate to our friends at Ecology to have at least one public information meeting in our state. John Price says 2012. Okay, was the prior iteration? Yeah, so 10 years ago. And so when there is a comment opportunity and a public information campaign about the opportunity, I hope that we can get a meeting in Oregon to help educate our residents about this opportunity. Any questions about this? Okay, then we can go on to the next. Laura, yes.
I thought you were finished. I can wait to the end if you want to get through your.
Oh my gosh, I'm just yakking on here, aren't I? I will. I'll move it along. Regional national forums. I sort of wanted to. I was going to talk a little bit more about the FFTF, National Governors Association. Sarah mentioned this in her presentation. Really, the intention that one of the broader intentions of Sarah's presentation earlier, I have this slide here, is just to make sure the board is aware of all the various regional, I call them regional and national forums. We participate in many opportunities afforded us to participate in various, what is called a task force, organizations and groups and efforts, even the Hanford Advisory Board, and perhaps even this board, we talk about it. There's a lot of different forums that are available that we take advantage of to share the Oregon position, get Oregon's opinion out, to learn, for us to educate ourselves, to talk to our peers. The one I have on the slide here in particular, the National Governors Association and Federal Facilities Task Force, FFTF, so there's a lot of acronyms around here, is a group of peers of myself. David Bowen, the director of Washington State Ecology's Nuclear Waste Program, represents states of Washington. And there's 13 states in total that send a representative to this FFTF. We're appointed by our state governors to represent our states to the FFTF. A technical forum, an engagement opportunity. We learn from each other. We learn from DOE. Sarah talked about the major meeting that all these forums got together in New Orleans at the end of November for an in-person meeting that was called the Intergovernmental Greeting, or Intergov, amongst all these forums to get together and talk about issues of concern across the whole nation. So it's really just I really appreciate the opportunity that I've been afforded to be able to learn, to meet peers in other states, to meet folks at DOE headquarters who show up at some of these meetings, and educate myself and help understand how best I can advocate for Oregon's interests in the ongoing Hanford cleanup. So there we go. Okay, I won't belabor this slide. So this is my last slide. Move on to the next one if you wouldn't mind, Mark. And Jeff Wyatt, perhaps we had traded emails about this. I know I'm getting a little ahead to the board business, but was typing up notes this morning in a fury, and I thought, well, let's just get it out there. Talk about our next meetings, if you don't mind. We can talk about this. This is really just thinking about the future of 208 CB meetings the rest of the year. We do 3 a year, and so I thought we'd at least talk about it here. Spring meeting coming up in May or June, and then a meeting in the fall. I say target October, but we have flexibility as to when these occur based on schedules permitting. Both are scheduled for in-person. We have funding through our DOE grant to do in-person meetings for 2 of the 3 meetings. And so I offer this up, board's decision on location and specific dates. We don't have to decide right now. I'm just put this up for thought process, and we can, if it's easier, we can trade an email or do a poll after the board meeting. But think about this, and really the two most important things I wanted to share on this slide. One, to get your minds thinking about dates specifically and locations. The third bullet under the spring, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but in my mind, I'd like to make that meeting all around a single theme. And that theme is, maybe I kind of captured this in this question, what's the future of Hanford post cleanup, including land use, including end states, long-term stewardship. And my idea would be to invite multiple parties, including parties we haven't heard from, Native American tribes, be invited to come and talk. The local economic development community from the Tri-Cities, it's called TriDec. I would invite them to talk about what they might have in mind, what that land could be used for. Of course, DOE, ecology, EPA, let's talk about this. It's a lot of questions on my mind, and I think it would be really interesting to have a whole meeting around a single theme. And then looking towards the fall, we didn't get to the B reactor on our tour in October of last year. The B reactor is now run by the National Park Service. And so coordination with DOE and the Park Service on touring is a little different. And so I would do my best and ask for some help from my team to try and secure a tour by the Park Service of the B reactor, if that's something that the board was interested in doing. I am, and I think perhaps everybody else would be as well. So there you go. So I throw this up for consideration.
Yeah, thanks, Max. One comment on the spring schedule. It looks like there's some hard conflicts in the first 2 weeks of June, so we're probably talking about the meeting the first 2 weeks of May or sometime in later June. So we can circle back to that schedule as well as the location maybe this afternoon after lunch.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, Laura.
Yeah, my question, Max, is the board going to take a position on House Bill 2215 that's been filed about repealing Oregon's Bill 469-590 of no more nuclear reactors in Oregon, which was established in the 1980s? And I just wonder if that's something that the board is going to weigh in on with our liaison in the legislature.
Well, that's a big question, Laura. The ODO, as a state agency, does not take positions on proposed legislation that we don't propose ourselves, and I didn't propose this one. I'm aware of the bill. I would say the board should probably consider carefully whether they take a position on legislation or not. That bill is sponsored by Rep. Levy, who's on this board, as amongst other sponsors. So it might be something you consider, but we as an agency don't take positions on legislation.
Can I offer a thought? Just the things like this have come up in the past through the years, and what we've kind of landed on is the board's direction is Hanford cleanup. It's not nuclear issues, and so I would think we should not collectively as a board weigh in on that topic.
Dan Solitz.
Yes, I helped to get that bill passed in the 1980s, the initiative process. And if that's going to be changed, then it should come back up the way it went down. And if they want it changed, then they can file an initiative petition and get signatures on it and take it to the voters directly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we are both ahead of schedule and behind lunch schedule. So we are going to adjourn for lunch for 30 minutes. So let's get back at 12:40.
I'll just
Is that-
remind everybody, go ahead and shut your cameras off during this break and mute your microphones.
Thank you. See you back in 30 minutes. Okay, it looks like everyone is beginning to tune back in after lunch. Welcome back. Now comes the fun part of the meeting. This is when we're actually expected to do some work. So the first order of business is to have a discussion of say 20 minutes or so about priorities for the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board. So we've circulated a draft. It's a list of 8 or 10 different priorities with a write-up, and it's not meant to be in any particular order of priority. So it's a non-prioritized priority list. And we wanted to have a general discussion about that. And I know several people, Mary Lou and Ken has weighed in on that with some very pertinent thoughts. So to get the discussion started, perhaps, let's see if maybe Mary Lou and Ken could kind of kick the discussion off with your thoughts on priorities.
Go ahead, Mary Lou, why don't you start?
Okay, my sense was to simply go to the web page for our board and take off from the objectives that we are assigned. And that's basically what I thought we should do. Some of those objectives, I think we haven't really fulfilled a whole lot, mainly in the outreach department. That's 25 words or less, my feelings.
And I've heard that feedback from several other people, Laura in particular, and Mia, that perhaps we could and should do more in terms of public outreach. We had a conference call recently with Columbia Riverkeeper, Hanford Challenge, and Physician for Social Responsibility to explore the possibility of getting, for example, a EPA environmental justice grant to help fund public outreach and do that collaboratively. So that's still on the table. I wouldn't say we made much progress. We would have to see what sorts of grants are available before we could really figure out how to use them. So Ken, I think you had a very, very good idea about something that we could do over the next few months.
Yeah, let me actually explain that, and I'll elaborate on a couple of other things too that I didn't in my email. I thought one thing that, and I would look to Max a little bit to see whether he feels this is most appropriate as an agency or a board action. But we have, as the discussion is mentioned, we have a lot of financial needs at Hanford, and that comes down to Congress. And Oregon has 3 new members of Congress right now. And I think this is an opportunity for the board to introduce itself, introduce Hanford by just kind of a letter of explanation. Dear members of Congress, just want to let you know about the work that's been going on at Hanford for over 30 years, why it's important to Oregon, how Oregon is involved through its Department of Energy, highlight a few of the issues like funding, the fact that Oregon's delegation is typically, supported Hanford funding, and then copy it to all the other members of our delegation, just as a reminder, because it doesn't, I don't think, hurt to do that. The other thing, Jeff listed a bunch of good topics on his priorities, and as I started looking at them and thinking at them a little bit more, it really comes down to where we think we can be effective. I think some public involvement activities, we could be effective there. But I look as well at some of the issues in Hanford, for example, the 324 building this morning. As I mentioned, it was November of 2010 when they first identified that as an issue. And now they're talking about, well, we think we'll begin excavation in 2025. So that's 15 years. Cesium strontium capsule removal is kind of still plugging along and hasn't started yet. That's another project that takes a while. There are issues related to that are just DOE doesn't want to focus on them because they're too big, they're too complex. You know, the issues of high-level waste disposal, of what happens with the tanks when they are hopefully emptied. And I was thinking maybe there's a couple of items there that we could just kind of be a thorn in the side to DOE of just saying, you know, just like I've tried to do a little bit with ecology on the holistic negotiations, just bring it up every meeting, let them know we're still interested. Don't let it just get pushed off, you know, years and years away without any discussion. So I think that could be an area where the cleanup board could be effective, is keeping a couple of items that we decide are important visible.
So Ken, what would you propose to be those 2 or 3 items?
You know, the 324 building and cesium strontium capsules both seem to be plugging along, although really slowly. And it wouldn't hurt to just ask each time about those. The bigger deal, I think, to me is what's going to happen with the high level aspect of the tank waste. We all know that the pretreatment facility is never going to operate. You know, they're struggling with even, it's kind of alarming to see the issues they're having with the melter heat up, where they're having, you know, which seems like, you know, a very tiny but important part of this project, you know, have electrical issues that has derailed it for a while. And you wonder what happens, what's going to be next to identify. So DOE doesn't even want to start talking too much seriously about high level waste when they haven't even got low level waste going. And I guess the high level waste aspect of keeping that visible, that at some point DOE has got to face it, and maybe that's part of the holistic negotiations. Let's hope it is. But I think that would be a viable topic to maybe keep raising. I like the idea of that Max has about focusing a little bit on future land use. Although I think that's going to be one of those that it's so far out in the future, so far out in the future. I don't know that we're going to be able to get much definitive ideas about it, because, you know, the cleanup's just going to go on and on and on. So I guess I would say, you know, without, and let me add another one. I mean, there's all kinds of things. The solid waste burial grounds, the burial grounds that spread across the 200 East and 200 West areas, DOE is not mentioning those at all. There was a period maybe 15 years ago where DOE used to work pretty hard at educating the Hanford Advisory Board at a technical level on some of these very complex issues. And they provided just a wealth of information about the solid waste burial grounds and how many trenches and what's in them and what they know, what's the level of knowledge they have about all of these. I haven't heard DOE bring up these trenches in years, because they'd like to just kind of leave them behind. So maybe that's another one to add for, you know, what's happening? What are you going to do?
Okay, thanks. One thought on the in-state of the entire site. I think the cleanup board hasn't effectively engaged with the Confederated Tribes, at least in the last couple of years. And that discussion, I think, would be a real good way for us to get back in in alignment with the Confederated Tribes. So that's, Max, can you address that? I think that's one of the things that you're looking to do.
Yeah, yes, and thanks, Ken, for those thoughts. Jeff, I agree. Part of my idea of having a meeting centered around future land use is to bring a perspective from the Native American tribes who have perhaps a closer relationship with the land, or just more of an interest in future land use and what they could do safely at the site than maybe we typically would talk about in a technical forum for cleaning up. The level of clean, so to speak, that has to be in place to safely do traditional practices on the land is a higher level than putting an industrial park, right? I mean, just to state the obvious. And so those decisions